One name I want to throw out there. Would you consider trading Karl-Anthony Towns for Trae Young?
This is not a 5 and 6 year run, Kev.
No. I agree. It's an older team. This is a
win now roster.
And that's what I mean. It's like, I think there should be urgency is my point, because a lot of the supporting cast is older. And I know Ant is young, but assuming progress for Ant next season, and then you assume the year after that, I want to really make the most of that 2-year window. And that's where I'm saying I would be looking for trades. I would be, because I want to make the most of those 2 years. Like one name I want to throw out there. Would you consider trading Karl-Anthony Towns for Trae Young? Would you trade Cat for Trae? That gives you a point guard. It puts Conley in a backup role, and it gives Ant support and shot creation. It activates Gobert on offense, because Trae is one of the best ever at throwing lobs. And it protects Trae on defense when you still would have Gobert and Naz Reid and McDaniels and Ant and all these guys. Cat for Trae feels like a potentially mutually beneficial trade for me when I look at both those rosters.
What is the chances? I know that this is crap on Cat night, but what are the chances? Cat was the man in Minnesota in a losing situation for a long time, and he moved aside. It said, no, this is the guy. You think that's going to be true of a guy like Trae Young? You think he's walking into a situation and being fine, being the second fiddle?
Yeah, well, I mean,
have you ever seen Trae Young be a second fiddle?
I mean, look, I've been anti-Trae. I've been a Trae hater for a long time. But I'm also willing to make moves that I think give my team a better chance of winning a championship. You could say the Raptors, well, should they really trade the face of their franchise, DeMar DeRozan, for a guy who's been injured and going to be a free agent in a year, and Kawhi Leonard? Well, I mean, I think they made the right choice, even though Kawhi's hobbling at the end, and even though he left in free agency, they won a championship. And with Trae, despite all his flaws as a player, he is only 25 years old. And when I'm looking at him fairly, I've been a hater of him in the Atlanta context. I'm a fan of Trae in certain contexts. I'm a fan of him in that Minnesota context. I think a lot of the flaws that he has become less significant. And Trae, I mean, would he accept, deferring to Anthony Edwards? Would he be willing to shoot more spot up threes? I don't know the answer to that question. If he didn't, let's just say that trade happened, Cat for Trae. And if Trae didn't accept that in Minnesota, he'd be a career loser if that happens. But the upside of accepting that is completely stepping forward in your career and doing the things that are necessary to play winning basketball at the highest level. And for a 25-year-old, you mentioned how Ant's 22. Well, Trae's still only 25. And there's still a chance that he has further growth through experience. I think he made some steps towards that this season, playing under Quinn Snyder, playing next to DeJounte Murray. So my belief in Trae this season actually increased. Whether he's in Atlanta or elsewhere, I hope it's elsewhere, because that Atlanta situation is a mess. But my belief in Trae Young actually increased this season with what I saw from him. By the way, the best defensive season of his career, still below average, but better than terrible.
If I'm moving off of Towns, I'm moving it, in my opinion. I'm not moving it for like a one-player star like that. I'm building out around Anthony Edwards with multiple guys.
One note on that, Chris.
He's an all-NBA guy too, so he gets paid a fortune as well.
My only counter to that is they have the 27th and the 37th pick in this year's draft, which is deep with good role players. To me, that's the path where you go get role guys. Get somebody who's ready to contribute right away. Chris Finch is somebody that I think would embrace playing a younger guy, especially when you have an older roster. He's just more of an open-minded coach, I think, with working with a front office. With that, rather than say like the conversation around Denver, where Booth drafted 3 rookies, Malone was unwilling to play 2 of them throughout the entire season. He cut loose one of them pretty early on. I think Finch would be a bit more connected and open to that if that were the path they end up going, if they drafted 2 rookies.
You think a point guard is the best kind of, like, we're looking for a, if you think, hey, Ant needs a better number 2.
I mean, I'm also thinking about like, well, what's the alternative? I mean, I'm not sure if there's I just don't know if there's actually another alternative than that makes any more sense than Trae. Like if you're going,
well, we
like
always
down,
talk about the guys that we think are going to get traded, and then everybody gets traded in this league.
Yeah,
it's never who we think. It's never who we think. We always talk forever about the same names. And where's this guy going? Where's this guy going? Where's this guy going? And then it's always like, oh, wow, I can't believe that guy got traded. I can't believe this guy got traded.
Sometimes it is those guys,
I mean, we usually spend a lot of time
who else?
What's that?
Jimmy Butler? Who else? I'm just curious. Like, you got to trade for Butler, trade Cat for Butler?
That would be the funniest trade ever.
That would be hilarious.
We'll say this. Look, they made their first finals in 20 years. And they had made the Gobert trade, which
conference
did not.
Conference finals.
Yeah, conference finals.
Yeah.
And they made the Gobert trade, which did not look good. But then they, much like Dallas, and I read John Hollinger's article maybe it was last week. It was really good. It was about how sometimes it's the first trade might be a mistake, but then you go and fix it with these other things. Or it could have been a mistake, and then you fix it. And so the Gobert thing looked pretty bleak, and then they went and got Mike Conley, and they went and got Nickeil Alexander-Walker, actually, in that deal too. And both of them became absolutely essential and really unlocked. Sometimes you could double down on some mistake. You hear about this all the time. It's like, oh, we drafted this quarterback, and so every year we're just going to keep on drafting receivers. And it's like, it wasn't that we kept missing on the receivers. Like, the original mistake was the quarterback, and we just kept compounding it by saying the reason he's not good is because he didn't have receivers. In some cases, you can make a deal like the Gobert deal and say, you know what, but D'Angelo Russell, this ain't it. And if we're going to fix this, then we need to, and they did, by getting Alexander Walker, who really found a home in a good situation, and obviously Conley was absolutely perfect for them. And so I think you got a lot to be proud of. That Minnesota crowd was all cheering them on at the end. And it's going to be a very interesting offseason. I mean, I'd be worried about screwing it up. I get that it's never fun to just say run it back, but how bad is running it back when you knocked off Denver? And you were there, and yeah, you got done in by Luka. But maybe the next time around, and you could say, well, it's not Anthony Edwards' fault, but who's taking over the game with 5 minutes left to go? They had two guys that did. Luka took over the game. Kyrie took over games. Minnesota didn't have somebody to take over the games. And I think that will eventually be Edwards. Oh, Trae Young. I mean, we're just gonna move past Anthony Edwards' development and just hand it over to Trae Young.
No.
Seems foolishness
I'm
to
saying,
me.
Then you have two.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Then you would have two. And one of those guys, it would make the big center, Gobert, more relevant in those situations too. Ant needs to get better at throwing lobs. Him and Gobert need to spend a lot of time in the gym this summer. Right? Travel to France and practice with him during the off moments with the French national team. I mean, I know you're with Team USA, but you guys got to get some time together. You got to get in the gym. I know you're going to be going against each other, but you got to get some time together on the court. He's got to get better at playmaking with Rudy Gobert, and he is better this season than he was last season when he never passed him the ball. But that's going to improve a lot. You can't have Gobert be so meaningless at the end of games.